I'm Shahar Azani, and in the news, Israel's upcoming elections. As we know, Israel is headed to a fourth round of elections in 2 years, this coming March 23rd, 2021. On February 4th, the final lists were submitted to the Central Elections Committee of all parties and all candidates who are putting themselves up for elections on this coming election. So who's running? Who's not? And what does it all mean? To enlighten us on this issue, I am thrilled to have with us again on JBS, Kobi Cohen, an Israeli political analyst and the host of Balagan, Israeli Politics and Society podcast. Kobi, welcome back on the show.
Thank you, Shahar, and it's great to join you again.
How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. You know, there is never a dull moment in Israel, and we are here to discuss what's going on.
That's very true.
Politically wise.
There is never a dull moment, and outside in New York, we may witness the slush, but in Israel, it's a real quagmire. So maybe we can dive into it, and you can help us understand. So first of all, just so that our viewers understand what we're talking about, what happened on February 4th?
So February 4th was the last day to submit the slate list, the electoral lists of candidates to the Central Election Committee in Israel. Eventually, we had 39 parties. Actually, it's not parties, it's electoral slates that were submitting their lists. And out of them, we will discuss 14 parties that are actually the main ones, because in every election we have many parties that don't even come near to pass the threshold. Some of them are more highlighted in the news, like the Democratic Party, which is some of the I would say demonstrators in Balfour party, but they don't, they are high on the news on one hand because they use a lot of social media, but in the thresholds, they don't even pass the 0.5%. On the other hand, you have somebody like Zalicha with the, Professor Yaron Zalika, who established the Economic Party, which also doesn't cross the threshold. So we're going to discuss them, but we're mostly going to discuss the 14 parties that are within the boundaries of getting electives into the next Knesset.
Kobi, I want to ask you before we dive into the list of slates, what is the electoral threshold in Israel and what does it mean?
Okay, so the electoral threshold is basically 3.25% of all of the voters, of all of the voting numbers. So it's nearly 3.9 mandates, which means that in order to get elected to the Knesset, you need to get at least 4 mandates, which is beyond the 3.25% of supporters in the election.
3.25% of all votes cast.
Exactly, of all votes count. And in all times, until 2014 actually, it used to be 2%. And when the State of Israel was founded actually, it was just 1%. So in 2014, what happened was, at that time, Avigdor Lieberman of Israel Beitenu was the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And he was trying to eliminate the Arab lists, the Arab parties. At that time, they had 3 parties in the Knesset, and eventually it was 4 parties. But he was trying to eliminate them because they were all small parties, 2 to 3 members of the Knesset. He said, we'll raise the threshold, we'll have less smaller parties. And, and eventually it almost, by the way, beat him, in his behinds, because in 2015, he only got 6 mandates, and some of the polls prior to the election were actually giving him 3 to 4 mandates. So he was saved, in the last minute. And what happened is that in 2015, what the Arabs did, and that's what I mentioned before, they created the joint list. The joint list is not a party. It's a formation of 4 different parties in the Arab sector, Ra'am, which is,
Kobi, let me just stop you there because we want to dive into the slate list now and we can go over it in an orderly fashion. But I just wanted to understand, we have the slate finalized on February 4th. We understand now what the threshold is, which is an important element of Israeli political system. And now maybe we can go over the slates themselves and you can tell us, what the slates are, who leads the slates, and what the status is vis-a-vis the leadership of the slate and its positions. Please feel free.
Of course. So let me start. So as I said, we have 39 slates in overall, but we're going to focus on 14. And I'll go by the biggest one in the polls to the smallest one. The first one, of course, is the Likud, led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The polls are giving them between, and I took an average, I took the lowest number of mandates they get to the highest, and they are between 28 to 32 mandates, which is quite amazing because Netanyahu has a lot of opposition at the moment from the right and from the left and from the right. But he's still holding every fourth Israeli in his support, which is an amazing achievement. I would give him also another achievement, actually two, of what he did with two other parties. One of them is with the Joint Arab List that he was able to split once again, and the Religious Zionist, which is a combination of, it's a collaboration of Bezalel Smotrich on one hand. He came from a Bayit Yehudi at that time, and with Itamar Ben-Gvir of Otzma Yehudit, he's Kahana's successor, and Noam Party, which is it's an anti-LGBTQ party that was founded in 2019. And that was a great success for him because he was able to minimize the loss of votes on the right wing. And with the Arabs, he was able to split them. And Ra'am, which is the Muslim section of the Arab parties,
right?
It's I would say the religious party is going to run as a standalone. It's not even close to cross the thresholds, which means that they're most likely going to lose a minimum of 5 mandates in the upcoming Knesset because the Joint Arab List, which is the joint list that was prior to that and won 15 seats in the 23rd Knesset, are actually in the polls that are at the moment between 8 to 11 seats.
So
the next
just
party
to understand, you have the Likud headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, and when you're saying success on the side of Netanyahu relating to the religious Zionists, you're saying that his success was bringing a few factions together because had they run on their own and they would not meet the threshold, all of the people who voted for them, those votes are going to disappear, just going to be thrown into the dustbin.
Exactly, they don't tally.
Okay, very good.
And that's something that already happened to them twice. I mean, not in that situation, but it happened to the hard right wing in the past.
And those votes are essential for the bloc that Netanyahu is part of or trying to establish.
On both ends, they are essential to Netanyahu. Netanyahu was trying to minimize the effect of the joint list, and he was successful because Mansour Abbas of Ra'am is willing to collaborate with Netanyahu. And the other faction of the joint list were not willing to collaborate with Netanyahu. So if he's hurting their strength, he's taking them down from 15 to 10 mandates, it's a great success. And on the other hand, he may get a chance of bringing the religious Zionist movement, slate into the Knesset, and he gets 4 to 5 more mandates on his side.
So after Likud, what's the next?
After the Likud, we have Yesh Atid with the member of the Knesset, Yair Lapid. Yair Lapid joined the Knesset in 2013. He founded Yesh Atid, and that was his greatest success. 2013, he became the second largest party with 19 mandates, and he became the Secretary of Finance under Netanyahu. It didn't work that well. After less than 2 years, Netanyahu fired him, and he's been in the opposition ever since. I will say that Yair Netanyahu is actually gaining votes now after being, he's
Yair Lapid.
Yair Lapid, sorry. Who did I say?
Yair Netanyahu, kind of.
Oh my God, I'm so into Netanyahu still, but yes. And Yair Lapid.
It seems everybody is, Kobi.
A lot of people, and I among them, are saying that he has some sort of a glass ceiling, because when you're checking his how the public sees him as a candidate for prime minister, then he doesn't get high scores. And that's one of the reasons that Netanyahu is leading by a lot of mandates, because they see him as more successful as a prime minister.
So the assumption is by some that Lapid is a convenient adversary to Netanyahu, as a focal point of the campaign, because of his background, because of his lack of his IDF service, being a reporter in the IDF, rather than and other elements in his personality that make him a comfortable focus for the Netanyahu campaign. Is that correct?
It's correct. More than that, Yair Lapid also brings a lot of antagonism, and for the right wing, right wing supporters, and especially for Netanyahu doesn't want to highlight the following person, which is Gideon Sa'ar and his party New Hope. Gideon Sa'ar used to serve under Netanyahu. He was a Likud member for more than a decade. And he had enough of Benjamin Netanyahu, so he founded New Hope, Tikva Hadasha, and he was for a short period of time, he was the second party in the polls with almost 20 mandates. But Netanyahu doesn't have any interest, to shed light on Gideon Sa'ar, because he knows that Gideon Sa'ar is quite popular on the right wing, among the right wingers. So what he's doing, he's targeting his arrows in Yair Lapid, which hopefully for Netanyahu will take the highlights from Gideon Sa'ar, and it will be easier for Netanyahu to weaken both Gideon Sa'ar and Naftali Bennett, who's leading Yamina, and a lot of the voters of former Blue and White Party, which was the second largest party in the 23rd Knesset, winning 35 mandates at that time. A lot of them parked with Naftali Bennett because they were disappointed of how Netanyahu was handling the COVID.
I just want to pause you there for a minute, just to summarize what we have. So we have the leading contenders at the moment, Likud with Benjamin Netanyahu, Yesh Atid with Yair Lapid. We have the newcomer, old newcomer, Gideon Sa'ar with New Hope.
Yes.
Parted ways with Netanyahu and has a lot of right-wingers in his party, which makes it, like you said, uncomfortable for Netanyahu to attack. Major contenders. Now we're moving to another one. You mentioned Yamina with Naftali
Bennett. Yes.
So how many seats do the polls?
Yamina are getting between 10 to 12 mandates at the moment. At one point, Naftali Bennett was already at 22 to 24 mandates, but that was before Gideon Sa'ar announced, that he's going to run against Netanyahu under New Hope. And he's been stable on 10 to 12 mandates ever since. The next party that we have, the next list is the Joint Arab List.
So according to your average on the polls, the four parties you just mentioned already have around 64, if not more, seats in the Knesset.
Yes.
You already have more than half the Knesset. So we know that they're going to be major players in whatever transpires after the elections. That's very good to understand. Okay, let's continue.
And I will say more than that. I do believe that the next, kingmaker is going to be Naftali Bennett, if I need to bet. Gideon Sa'ar already said that he's an alternative to Netanyahu. He declared it. It doesn't mean that eventually he will be on the opposition, but it's most likely that he's going to try and give Netanyahu a hard time trying to form a coalition after the election. And Naftali Bennett, even though he's saying that he's running for prime minister, when he's being asked, so you're here to replace Netanyahu, he's not giving a direct answer. and it's most likely that Naftali Bennett, no matter what, will not go against his base, against the right wing. So even if he'll have the chance to form a coalition with with Yair Lapid, I doubt if he will do so. Same with Gideon Sa'ar. They are not here, to crown Yair Lapid. They are here to become Netanyahu's successors.
So my question,
after Netanyahu's eras.
Before we run through the rest of the list, and I know we're running short of time.
Yeah, so I'll make it quick for the next one.
No, but that's fine. Do you think that they're gonna, based with the alternative of having another Netanyahu government or handing the premiership in some sort of a rotation, maybe agreement with Yair Lapid, which option do you think they'll take?
I think that it's more likely that it will be another government for Netanyahu, or that will go to a fifth round of election. But times will tell. Listen, Netanyahu has a lot of, I would say that he has a lot of tricks in his sleeve. I mean, the way he was able, to get Benny Gantz into his, putting a trap, and Benny Gantz fell for his trap. And what he did now with both the religious Zionist on one hand and the joint Arab list on the other hand, he's the most skilled politician.
So he's a masterful political magician.
Oh,
so
definitely. I
want to take you down the rabbit hole for a minute, Kobi, since you're such an expert in this field.
Yes.
We have the elections in March. There are about, a couple of months for a coalition to be formed, unless it's not successful, and then another round of election is being called. If indeed we are heading in the direction of a fifth round, then the current government that's right now in power in Israel, the coalition government between Benny Gantz and Netanyahu, continues to serve as a transitional government.
Exactly, and it will continue to serve as a transitional government until a new government is sworn oath in the Knesset.
And what happens if a fifth round of election reaches the date of November, where they're supposed to, the rotation is supposed to take place? Is there a chance that Benny Gantz will become the premier?
So I must say that I doubt it. In theory, there is a chance, because if you remember, way back in 2020, when they formed the current coalition, they had to change the basic law of the government, and they shaped it in a way that says that no matter what, if this government still exists, then in November of 2021, Benny Gantz will be the next prime minister of Israel, which is a completely personal, change in the law.
Right.
But I do believe that even if it happens, the legislative board, which is the Knesset, they are the one who can change the law, and it's not the government. And I do believe that even if we'll need to go to a fifth round of election, Netanyahu will find the majority to change this law back. But time will tell. Maybe Sa'ar and Bennett wouldn't join him on this one, and then he will be trapped in some sort of a way.
I have to ask you, Kobi, you were mentioning the agreement with Benny Gantz, and we remember March of 2020 when Benjamin Netanyahu was sitting in the news studio, prime time. I believe it was Saturday night, where he said no tricks, no shticks.
It was March of 2020, yes.
Right, and not only shticks and tricks were up his sleeve, he also went as far as devoiding the state of Israel from a budget to function properly, just for the sake of undermining this agreement. So under these circumstances, and Benny Gantz, like you said, falling on his face, and like you mentioned, from 30-odd seats of the blue and white coalition to barely meeting the threshold, who under these circumstances, what politician may agree to sign another deal with Netanyahu to establish a coalition, whether it's Bennett or Sa'ar or anybody else? What will be their willingness to do so, having witnessed what they witnessed with Benny Gantz?
Look, we need to remember that Netanyahu has a strong coalition with the ultra-Orthodox. He's bind with the ultra-Orthodox parties is hardly unbreakable.
Right.
And I think that, Yair Lapid is now putting the ultra-Orthodox aside, and also Gideon Sa'ar, who has great relationship, by the way, with both UTJ and Shas leaders, Aryeh Deri and Rabbi Litzman, but it doesn't mean that they will join forces with them. I don't see the ultra-Orthodox parties recommending anyone else but Netanyahu. I don't see them changing the coalition. And on the other hand, once again, you have the religious Zionist with Bezalel Smotrich, who's also supporting Netanyahu. So if Netanyahu gets the ultra-Orthodox and Smotrich, he's already at 50 mandates. But once again, we'll have to wait and see whether Bezalel Smotrich is in fact going to be in the next Knesset. It's all in theory, what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then all he needs is one party to join him.
Right.
And he can promise, look, let's be honest, Naftali Bennett also fell into Netanyahu's hands a couple of times. He put him as the Ministry of Security for 2 months. And then he fired him.
Kobi, I have to tell you, on that issue of Naftali Bennett, we all remember a certain video when the Prime Minister was speaking to his supporters, making fun of his decision to appoint Naftali Bennett as Minister of Defense. And everybody should have or has an ego, especially in politics. So one wonders which direction this is going to take. I'm pausing you there because we only have a few minutes left. So let's go quickly back to the list so that you understand. Likud, Yesh Atid, New Hope, Yamina.
The next one is the Joint Arab List.
Right.
Without Ra'am, they're standing on 8 to 11 mandates, depends, on the poll.
Right.
Then we have Shas, who remains stable with 8 mandates. That's what they have. That's what they had in the last 3 elections. UTJ with United Torah Joint, which is the ultra-Orthodox Ashkenazi party with 7 to 8 mandates. Israel Beitenu under MK Avigdor Lieberman with 7 to 8 mandates. Labor, who suddenly rose under Merav Michaeli between 5 to 7 mandates. They were not even crossing the thresholds until recently when they were under MK Amir Peretz. The next one is Meretz, and I'm putting a mark. Meretz has between 4 to 5 mandates. In recent polls yesterday, I'm talking about February 9th, they were not crossing the thresholds. They were below the thresholds, and they are quite worried about it. The next ones are Blue and White with Benny Gantz. Also, he has a soft 3 to 4 mandates of supporters still left, which is an amazing thing. And everybody expected him to withdraw and not to run again. But he may not have a lot of mandates, but he do have a lot of money because of the law and because of their original size in the outgoing Knesset. Then he has nearly 22 million shekels to spend on a campaign. The next one is Religious Zionist under Bezalel Smotrich. They're having between 2 to 4 mandates. And then we have Ra'am with Abbas Mansour, former member of the Joint List, with 2 to 3 mandates. And the last one that I'll mention is the Economic Party under Professor Yoron Zelicha, which gains between 0.5 to 1.5 mandates in the polls. I will mention 3 parties that eventually did not run. All of their leaders decided to withdraw. The first one I'll put is Tnufa under Ofer Shelach. Ofer Shelach left Yair Lapid. He was his right hand for many years.
Right.
But he got tired of the way Lapid is running the show. He was trying to join forces with Merav Michaeli, but he was unwilling to run in the primaries in the Labour Party, and Merav Michaeli, on our hand, was not willing to promise any shiryunim. I forgot the word, Shahar, maybe you remember it?
Yeah, any seats on her list without primaries, I understand.
Yes, okay, that's a good way to describe it. Then the next one is Telem under Moshe Bogi Alon. Moshe Bogi Ya'alon was a member of Yesh Atid. He joined forces with Yair Lapid for the next couple of elections. It was Yesh Atid Telem.
Lapid promised him the second place on his list.
Yes, and Moshe Bogi Ya'alon, for years now, he has the way he views himself, and there is the way the public sees him. He doesn't, as a character, he doesn't stand alone. But he add support to the list that he was joining, if he would have joined. But eventually, as a standalone party for his own, it didn't work. And the last one, it's Ron Huldai, the successful mayor of the city of Tel Aviv for the last 22 years, decided to form a new party, which is called the Israelis. In less than a month and a half, they crashed from 8 to 9 mandates in the polls from the day he announced the establishment of this party until they did not cross the thresholds in the polls. He was also trying to collaborate with Merav Michaeli, but it didn't work. I will say that Ron Huldai has been a Labour Party supporter for years, but he always saw it as I would say as a swamp, and that was the main reason he didn't want to join the Labour Party officially and try to form a new government, a new party. The attempt failed, and that was the fastest, I think, crash of an Israeli party in Israeli history.
He really went diving down, and I remember he refused to commit that he will be leaving his position as the mayor of Tel Aviv, a very comfy and pleasant position that he's been doing rather successfully in the last few years. And I believe that was part of the reason why people didn't really believe in the sincerity of his intentions in running, or what do you think was the cause?
It did hurt him, but I think that mostly the thing that hurt him the most was the fact that they didn't handle it well. Look, everybody has a day job, okay? The members of the Knesset are still being paid when they are doing their campaigns. The prime minister is running a campaign all year round, okay? Nobody is complaining to them, don't be a prime minister for a couple of months for the election time, because you can. He's entitled to stay as prime minister.
No, but Kobi, he refused to say that after the elections to the Knesset, he will necessarily resign. He was not sure.
Yeah, so that's what, I agree with you that's what hurt him the most. But most of the critics that he got wasn't on the fact that he's not willing to commit to quit his job in the municipality after the election, but that he was unclear about what he wants to do. And everybody realized that he's technically waiting to see what will be the outcomes, and then he will make the decision if he's doing the final transition from the municipality to the Knesset, or he won't. And yeah, that's definitely hurt him.
Kobi, I can't thank you enough. I'm telling you, I'm sitting here with you, and I know that you and we can dive into this at length, and we will, because this conversation of ours sounds to me like much more of a beginning than an end. So I look forward to speaking with you again and having you on JBS in preparation of the March 23rd elections in Israel. Thank you very much for joining.
Same here. Thank you very much, Shahar, for having me. And I hope we'll enlighten our audience.
Absolutely. And thank you all for watching. And to all we say, stay safe and stay healthy. I'd like to thank our director, Sloan Copeland, JBS's managing director, Dara Golub, our technical manager, Michael Paley, transmission manager, John McDevitt, and to our wonderful producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. For JBS, I'm Shahar Azani. Until next time, see you soon. Shalom and lehitraot.